Welcome to the second of 4 Jane Austen July book tags I'm going to do this month. I always forget to introduce myself. My name is Jenna, and this is Books Love Jenna, as in those books, they just love me. I usually post 2 videos a month, but this month I'm doing a whole lot more. Because it's summer break, I'm a teacher. And so if you are finding me now, or if you haven't been around for a long time, don't be shocked when in August, maybe September, I suddenly cut back to 2 videos a month. But for now, I'm enjoying myself and yeah, want to keep coming back and doing a video a week, at least through July. So I'm going to do the Jane Austen at Home book tag. Home is like one of my favorite things. I love home. I'm a homebody. I love to travel. I love to explore. I love to go out and have fun, but I really, really, really like being home. Like, it's just as fun to me to stay home all day as it is to go out into the world. So I thought that this might be a good one to do. I have a stack of books precariously wobbling next to me. I have my computer open with the prompts. I will say that I found this, it's I think from 2021. Quite a few people did it back then, but I don't know who's done it now, so I'm not going to tag anybody. If you have never done this one, feel free, consider yourself tagged. I'll let you self-select. Okay, and this is originally from Tilly of Tilly's Shelf. I don't know who Tilly is. I didn't find it on Tilly's channel. I found it on somebody else's channel, but that was the original poster. So Tilly of Tilly's Shelf created the Jane Austen at Home tag, and it is their original tag. And I will post their video and maybe even watch it down below. So, oh, I saw it on Roz's channel. Roz at Scallydandling. Yeah, that makes sense. I do occasionally watch Roz, especially around Jane Austen July and Victober time. So yes, that does make sense. So I saw it on Roz. I'll put Roz's video down below as well. But originally it is from Tilly at Tilly's Shelf. Okay, and the way that this is set up, it's kind of inspired by Lucy Worsley's biography of Jane Austen at Home. Thus the tag title, Jane Austen at Home. So each prompt is about one of the houses in the books. So we're just gonna dive into it. We're just gonna go houses, home, old houses. I mean, this is my jam. Here we go. Prompt number 1 is Mansfield Park. So there will be the house, or the Mansfield Park is much bigger than a house, but there will be the house, and then there will be a quote, and then it will tell you what the prompt is. Number 1, Mansfield Park. The grandeur of the house astonished but could not console her. Name a grand book that may or may not have been difficult to read. I have 3. If you watched my Q&A, you will know that if someone says pick one, I have to pick more. If someone says do one, I have to do more. If someone says there are 3 available, I'm gonna pick 4. It's just the way I am. So there are 3. I had a hard time deciding what grand meant. And so I've got 3 books that I think are grand in 3 different ways. Or 3 stories that I think are grand in 3 different ways. I'm going to start with what I think the prompt intended, which is a book that is large in scope and or size. Much like my coffee mug. And I'm going to go with A Suitable Boy by Vikram Seth. If you've never read A Suitable Boy and you consider yourself to be a reader of big books, then this is definitely a book you need to get on your radar. It's over 1,000 pages and they are like almost see-through. Like, I was holding 2 pages there. I thought I was holding 1 and it still felt really, really thin. Like, these are like Bible pages. They are so thin. Rice paper. And there are close to 1,500 of them. 1,350 pages. That's a lot of pages. This is essentially The story of partition. It is essentially the story of partition, metaphorically, and finding a path through partition. For those of you who are not familiar with the term partition, I'm referring to the separation of Pakistan from India. You can look into it. It was a very turbulent time. A lot of things were going on, a lot of political change, the British leaving, Gandhi. Think Gandhi. Everybody knows Gandhi, right? The partition is happening, and it's a little civil war. And so this is kind of the story of that metaphorically, but on the outset, it's also like what's most visible about this story is that it is a story of matchmaking. You've got Lotta, whose mother really, really wants to arrange a good marriage for her. Now, arranged marriages still happen. They happen in many, many cultures, and they're very common in India. There's a lot of love matches too, but there's still something about an arranged marriage that feels very stable and controlled and like it has longevity to a lot of families. The caste system, although doesn't exist, still exists and influences. Even if somebody has rejected that ideology, it still influences like groupthink. And so there's something to that as well. And in this book, you get to see all of those things working in the lives of Lotta and all of her possible suitors. So there are people who are possible love matches. There are people who are just really kind of sweep her off her feet kind of suitors. There are the stable people who her mother wants her to marry, and who will she choose and why. And each of these men who are possible suitors for her represent some aspect of India and Pakistan and some aspect of society. As you read it, it really feels like an epic sweeping love story in the tradition of like Gone with the Wind. It's not, Lotta is not Scarlett O'Hara. She's not at all like Scarlett O'Hara. She's a lovely, lovely girl. But it's like that kind of idea where it's telling a story that is much bigger than the story it's telling. It better be at this many pages. And this is Vikram Seth's like awesome work of wonder, their work of staggering genius. It is really, really grand. Yeah, it's really grand. I have only read it once, and then I have read bits and pieces of it multiple times. I have often sat down to reread it, and I don't know if I ever actually will. Like this is the War and Peace of our age. This is Forever Amber. This is among those greats. And if you haven't read it, I do highly suggest you read it, but it's a commitment. It's a commitment. It's not a difficult read. It's just a lot of characters. I do suggest you keep track, like make a list. There's a lot of characters and multiple storylines going on at once. They tried, I don't remember who, maybe Apple TV, maybe, I don't know. They tried to do a miniseries. Oh, maybe it was the BBC. That would make sense. They tried to do a miniseries of this and it fell so far short I couldn't even get into it. So if you are familiar with that and it didn't appeal to you or it really appealed to you, let that kind of be a guide for picking this book up as well. If it didn't appeal to you, you'll probably love the book. If it did really like hit the spot for you, it felt satisfying, maybe the book might be too much. This is a grand book. Highly recommend. Love. I said there are 3, and this is my second one. This is not grand in size, but it is grand in scope and heart. This is A Town Like Alice. This is a tiny little edition of this book. For a while on Book Outlet, they were selling these for like $2.95, and I picked it up because the title sounded familiar. I had never read anything by Neville Shute, and this book unlocked a Neville Shute superfan inside of me that I did not know was hiding there. Neville Shute has become one of my absolute favorite authors. Nothing I have read by him has disappointed me in any way. They are all different from each other. He's got like World War II historical fiction. He's got science fiction. He's got all sorts of he's got range. The man has range. But what remains the same always is like the heart, the insight, the wisdom, and the storytelling. Like nobody unfolds a story like this man. In A Town Like Alice, you have Jean. She is, I'm just refreshing myself on the details. Like I know what this book is about, but I don't know that I know how I got to that conclusion. I know the heart and soul of this book, but I may not know the characters' names, so bear with me for one moment. So we've got Jane, and yeah, they're in Malaysia. That's right. They're in Malaysia. Japan invades. She's a British citizen. It's World War II, right? And Japan invades Malaysia, and they're taken, the women and children that are collected that are expatriates, like they're expats living in Malaysia, and they hadn't evacuated yet. They are collected and taken on a march. Basically, this march, they're being told that they're being taken to a particular area. But really what this march is basically like a walk to death. Like they're supposed to walk until they die. And some of them their bodies just refuse to die. And over the course of the march, many things happen, including that Jean meets a man who does a really amazing thing. A really, really amazing thing. And it makes me want to cry. I haven't read this book in such a long time, and I just got goosebumps all over my body and wanted to cry. That's the impact that this story has on me. I have not read this book since, I know what apartment I was living in, so it was 2021. I have not read this book since 2021, and just like saying the words like, this man does a really incredible thing, made me tear up and gave me goosebumps. So if you haven't read this book, let that be like the thing that compels you to pick it up. He does a really amazing thing, and you don't know if he survives or not, and like the story continues on. And I won't tell you what happens, but well, I have to do a little bit of a spoiler. He does survive, and they do reunite, and like together they make the most amazing dream come true. Like something that seems absolutely incredibly impossible. It's a dream that he had for a place that he loves and knows, and it's huge. It's so much bigger than him, this dream. And he shares it with her. And then they come back together after a long separation, and they make this dream come true. It's like they have to be together in order for this thing to happen. And it's not just a thing that happens for them. It's a thing that happens that impacts positively communities and generations. And it's the story of how the good things that the future generations are experiencing come about through these two people. And it's just the most amazing story. It's just the most amazing story. And the way that it is told, Mr. Shute is a master storyteller. And I need to reread this. I want to sit down and reread this today. This is so good. I do remember reading it in like 1 or 2 days the first time I read it. I didn't know it was like a soul book for me. Like it just hit. And now I want to reread it right now. So maybe I might actually do that when this video is over. Okay. Number 3 for question number 1. Number 3 for question number 1 is actually a poem and musical piece by K. Tempest. I have the CD that accompanies. The poem, which I also have, because I taught this when I taught contemporary literature. When I taught a 12th grade contemporary literature class. And so I would play the CD as we read the book, because it's a performance poem and you really have to hear it, but it's a performance poem set to like an orchestra, and it's really beautiful and really impactful. It's about 2 couples in modern England, and I don't know, Liverpool or Leeds or somewhere like that. And I don't remember why I made these, but I made all of these little cards, and I think I was gonna send them to somebody. Like I kind of have a feeling about who I was gonna send them to. I have actually no memory of making these, but I did. I made these. I think I was gonna use them as postcards. I'm gonna have to think about these for a little bit longer. I don't know when the last time I opened this book was. Probably the last time I taught it, which would have been like 2015. So yeah, it's been a long time. That's funny. Anyway, I'll just start with the beginning. I'm gonna read just a little bit to you so that you can kind of get a feel for what's going on. So in the old days, the myths were the stories we used to explain ourselves. But how can we explain the way we hate ourselves? The things we've made ourselves into, the way we break ourselves into, the way we overcomplicate ourselves. But we are still mythical. We are still permanently trapped somewhere between the heroic and the pitiful. We are still godly. That's what makes us so monstrous. But it feels like we've forgotten we're much more than the sum of all the things that belong to us. The empty skies rise over the benches where the old men sit. They are desolate and friendless. And the young men spit. Inside, they're delicate, but outside, they're reckless. And I reckon that these are our heroes. These are our legends. That face on the street you walk past without looking at, or that face on the street that walks past you without looking back, or the man in the supermarket trying to keep his kids out of his trolley, or the woman by the post box fighting with her brawly. Every single person has a purpose in them burning. Look again and allow yourself to see them. Millions of characters, each with their own epic narratives, singing "It's hard to be an angel until you've been a demon." The sky is so perfect, it looks like a painting, but the air is so thick that we feel like we're fainting. Still, the myths in this city have always said the same thing, about how all we need is a place to belong, how all we need is to know what's right from what's wrong, and how all we need is to struggle to find out for ourselves which side we are on. We all need to love and be loved and keep going. There may be no monsters to kill, no dragon's teeth left for the sowing, but what there is the flowing of rain down the gutters. What there is the muttering mutters. What we have here is a brand new mythic palette, the parable of the mate you had who could have been anything but he turned out an addict, or the parable of the prodigal father returned after years in the wilderness. Our morality is still learned through experience, gained in these cities in all of their rage and their tedium, and yes, our colors are muted and grayed, but our battles are staged all the same, and we are still mythical. Call us by our names. We are perfect because of our imperfections. We must stay hopeful. We must stay patient, because when they excavate the modern day, they'll find us, the brand new ancients. And so this is told as an epic poem. And when you hear it in Kay Tempest's poetic rhythm, it's really powerful. And then add to that like the live orchestra, and oh my word, it's flooring. It does tell a very specific story, but it keeps the refrain, keeps drawing you back to how we are all these mythic creatures, these mythic people. We are all in some sense Zeus. We are all in some sense Athena. We are all in some sense these archetypes. They are archetypes of us, that each generation is just a reinstitution of the same archetypes, the same needs, wants, drives, desires, motivations, successes, failures, the same jealousies and wants. And it's done so beautifully. And now I want to reread this too. Making a mess for myself here. I'm making a mess. I could listen to it in under 2 hours, so maybe that's what I'll do. It is phenomenal, and this is available on Audible, I believe. I don't think it's on anything else. It might be on Spotify. I don't know. Hang on, let me check that out. Let me check that out right now, because that would be amazing. Let's see. No, It is not. It is not. It is on Audible though. I do know that because I had kids. We never had enough time to listen to the whole thing in one go. And so I had kids who would do a free trial of Spotify to get the rest of the book, which is great because, I mean, how many 12th graders do you know who are like, ooh, I need to get the rest of that poem? Okay, so there's question 1 done. Buckle up, it's gonna be a ride. Question 2, that was question 1, Mansfield Park, a grand book. This is question 2, Barton Cottage. In comparison of Norland, it was poor and small indeed. Name a book about a household in difficult circumstances. Barton Cottage is from Sense and Sensibility. It's the cottage. So when the women in the family lose their right to live in their home with the death of the father, the son, who has the right to take over the home, he and his wife come and they kick out the women who are grieving, right? They're grieving and now they have nowhere to go. And the mother's cousin, who they've never met, offers Barton Cottage for them to come and live in. It's a little cottage. And it's not a grand house, but it is a little cottage. It's somewhere to call their own, to make their own. And it's a reduction in circumstance for them, but it's also a haven. It's also a miracle. And so they go to Wuthering Heights. No, I just told you the name of the book I'm about to say. So they go to Barton Cottage. And my book for this of a household in difficult circumstance is Wuthering Heights. I couldn't find my normal copy of Wuthering Heights, but I had this one handy, so I just grabbed it. I've only read this one once, and it's really great. This is one of those annotated versions. It's got images and trees, family trees, which you need for Wuthering Heights, and just all sorts of things. But we're going to go with Wuthering Heights. This is one of my favorite books of all time. This is one of the most beautiful books of all time. And I hesitated to say that because I know so many people have so many preconceived ideas about this. Even if you've read it, oftentimes you read it through the predominant lens of this being a vengeance story, some people read it as a sibling story. Some people read it as a romance. Heathcliff gets a really bad rap. Kathy doesn't get as much of a bad rap, but she should get the worst of it all. This is one of the most beautiful, and I'm going to just say it, and people are going to disagree with me, and that's okay, but this is one of the most beautiful romances ever written. I did it. I made the controversial comment. If you're not familiar with the story of Wuthering Heights, this is the story of Heathcliff, a young boy. There will be spoilers. This is the story of Heathcliff, a young boy who's found by a man, brought home to that man's house, and raised like the son of a family friend. He's not really a son in this family. He's not fully adopted. He's different. He's dark. He's described as dark. So that could be skin color, but I think also, and in the case of this story, more importantly, like personality, like predetermined, like he's a pessimist. He's got a dark turn, a dark bent. It's a little bit hopeless. Just like, that's just the way he is. It's a personality trait. And Kathy, the daughter, is kind of wild, and she's drawn to him because he's different. At first, she's drawn to him because he's different and also wild. And together they can meet that kind of need in each other. Like, they're soulmates, they're kindred spirits. There's something different about them, and they sense that in each other, and they're like magnetized to each other. They're drawn to each other, and it's a dark thing though. It's very dark, but somehow those two darknesses come together and create a light for themselves, not for others. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying this is something that anybody wants to attain, work towards. But I get it. And they create their own light. They give each other peace and hope and love, and they grow up together, and then the draws of society, like what will other people think, get into Kathy's head. And even though he's everything she wants and needs, she accidentally rejects him. He hears half a sentence, jumps to a conclusion, and runs away. Basically, he overhears Kathy say that, in fact, let me find the actual quote. So it is chapter 9. So Catherine comes home from the neighbors where she has just been proposed to by a very respectable man, and she is torn because she is in love with Heathcliff and has never had to express that or name that or label that. It's just something that existed. She's never had to identify it within herself, and now she has to make a choice suddenly. And she's been playing this game. She's been playing this social game where can she get ahead? Can she be successful and survive and be a part of something more normal than she's ever been a part of before? Is that open to her? And this very normal person has just asked to marry her. And she knows she's talking all of her inner workings out with Nellie, who was kind of the governess, kind of the step-in mom. So, she thinks she's talking it all out with Nellie, and she thinks that she can have it both ways, right? So Nellie says, if you marry Edgar Linton, you will have to forsake Heathcliff. You will have to give him up. And Nellie responds, we separated? Who is to separate us, pray? They'll meet the fate of Milo. Not as long as I live, Ellen, for no mortal creature. Every Linton on the face of the earth might melt into nothing before I could consent to forsake Heathcliff. Oh, that's not what I intend. That is not what I mean. I shouldn't be Mrs. Linton were such a price demanded. He'll be as much to me as he has been all his lifetime. Edgar must shake off his antipathy and tolerate him, at least. He will when he learns my true feelings towards him. Nellie, I see now you think me a selfish wretch, but did it never strike you that if Heathcliff and I married, we would be beggars? Whereas, if I marry Linton, I can aid Heathcliff to rise and place him out of my brother's power. So, in her mind, she's like, by marrying Edgar Linton, I can have social power, and I can use my social power to help the man I love. And she thinks that the two men are gonna be A-okay with this. Nellie is like, with your husband's money, Miss Catherine, you'll find him not so pliable as you calculate upon, and though I'm hardly a judge, I think that's the worst motive you've given yet for being the wife of young Linton. I mean, understatement of the year. So here is where it starts. Here is where the whole crux of this entire thing, this is the tower moment. This is where everything falls apart, okay? It is not, retorted she. It is the best. So remember, Nellie just said that's the worst reason you've given for marrying Edgar Linton. And she's like, it's the best reason I've ever had for marrying Edgar Linton. The others were the satisfaction of my whims, and for Edgar's sake, too, to satisfy him. This is for the sake of one who comprehends in his person my feelings to Edgar and myself. I cannot express it, but surely you and everybody have a notion that there is or should be an existence of yours beyond you. What were the use of my creation if I were entirely contained here? My great miseries in this world have been Heathcliff's miseries, and I watched and felt each from the beginning. My great thought in living is himself. If all else perished and he remained, I should still continue to be. And if all else remained and he were annihilated, the universe would turn to a mighty stranger. I should not seem a part of it. My love for Linton is like the foliage in the woods. Time will change it. I'm well aware as winter changes the trees, my love for Heathcliff resembles the eternal rocks beneath, a source of little visible delight, but necessary. Nellie, I am Heathcliff. He's always in my mind. Not as a pleasure any more than I am always a pleasure to myself, but as my own being. So do not talk of our separation again. It is impracticable. It is impracticable. And she paused and hid her face in the folds of my gown, but I jerked it forcibly away. I was out of patience with her folly. That's Nellie talking. Now we're back to... Oh, that's Nellie talking. If I can make any sense of your nonsense, miss, it only goes to convince me that you are ignorant of the duties you undertake in marrying, or else that you are wicked, unprincipled. But trouble me no more with secrets. I will not promise to keep them. You'll keep that? She asked eagerly. No, I will not promise. It goes on from there. What you learn as it progresses is that Heathcliff had been overhearing this conversation. And he left after she said earlier that it would degrade her to marry him. And so he didn't hear her say all those things about how she and him are one. He goes off, he disappears for years. For years, he's gone. She doesn't think he's coming back. She thinks she's ruined it all. So she goes ahead and marries Edgar Linton. And then when Heathcliff comes back, he's come back, and this is one of the great mysteries of literature. Nobody knows what Heathcliff was doing while he was gone. But when he comes back, he's richer than all of them, and he's bent on revenge. He's really bent on winning her heart. But that darkness in them both keeps them apart. It keeps them from, it makes them willfully misunderstand the other. They choose to misunderstand each other. And in a very, very harmful, visceral, awful set of ways. And she starves herself to death, basically. There's a lot in here about control and power. And she basically starves herself to death. And when she dies, the story continues on through the next generation, which Heathcliff is still orchestrating. And what does he have to prove anymore? Very few people ask why he continues. People are just well, Heathcliff's just awful, right? Heathcliff's just terrible. That's just who he is. Why is he still causing harm? Cathy's gone. He's got nothing left to prove to anyone. Linton is like a bug to him, means nothing. He's punishing himself. Heathcliff is punishing himself. He's putting himself through pain for having caused her pain. And Cathy basically starves herself to death to cause herself pain, to punish herself for putting him through pain. It's messed up. I'm not saying that it's I'm not saying that it's the kind of romance you want in your life, but it is such a love story, right? And she haunts him. She haunts him. He asks her as she's dying to haunt him. to never let him go. And then she haunts him, and the ghost of her terrifies him. She comes to the window every night, banging, begging to be let in, and it drives him crazy. It drives him absolutely nuts until he finally responds to the ghost. And then there is peace in all the generations and in their afterlife. It's the story of a love that will not die. It's going back to Grace in Kay Tempest's poem Grace, where it says something like, love said, if you bring forth, it's actually the quote, if you bring forth what is inside you, it will save you. And if you do not bring forth what is inside you, it will destroy you. And that is what's going on in Wuthering Heights. That is what's going on in Wuthering Heights. And it's so much destruction until they finally both just give in to the inevitable. And then there's peace. Then there's salvation. That Kathy speech is also reminiscent of a poem that so many people attribute to talking about God. And it can be read that way. And I do think that probably Emily Bronte was like, ain't this clever? But it's her most famous poem. Lots of people know parts of this poem, if not all of this poem, and that is "No coward soul is mine." So Kathy's speech, she says, if all else perished and he remained, I should still continue to be. And if all else remained and he were annihilated, the universe would turn to a mighty stranger. I should not seem a part of it. And then go to her second to last poem that she ever wrote, which is "No Coward Soul is Mine." She wrote this in 1846. So, no coward soul is mine, no trembler in the world's storm-troubled sphere. I see heaven's glory shine, and faith shines equal, arming me from fear. O God, within my breast, almighty, ever-present deity, life that in me hast rest, and I undying life of power than in thee. Vain are the thousand creeds that move men's hearts, unutterably vain, worthless as withered weeds or idlest froth amid the boundless main. To waken doubt in one, holding so fast by thy infinity, so surely anchored on the steadfast rock of immortality. With wide embracing love, thy spirit animates eternal years, pervades and broods above, changes, sustains, dissolves, creates, and rears. Though earth and moon are gone, and suns and universes cease to be, and thou wert left alone, every existence would exist in thee. There is no room for death, nor atom that his might could render void, since thou art being and breath, and what thou art may never be destroyed. He's the rock upon which everything is built. Even though that's not as aesthetically pleasing as the lichen, he's the rock. He's the universe, and even if the universe were annihilated, everything would still exist in him. Everything. The speech is the crux of the entire book. The speech is the crux of the entire book. It's also, I believe, the crux of Emily Bronte's entire worldview. Wuthering Heights. Question number 2. Done. You thought because I only had one book that would be fast. Question number 3. Hartfield, Emma. I believe few married women are half as much mistresses of their husband's house as I am of Hartfield. Name a book that you feel entirely the mistress of. So I took this to mean like it's the book that you know backwards and forwards. It's the book that feels like home. It's the book that you know how to navigate. It's the book that knows you back. And if you've been around for a while, you should know what book that's going to be. For me, that's Jane Eyre. This. Oh, it has everything. It has everything. This book is my book. If Kathy is Heathcliff, I am Jane Eyre. Jane Eyre is me. I love this book. I love this book so much. It is about knowing yourself. It's about trusting yourself. It's about facing your shadows. It starts with a young girl being raised in her aunt's house. She believes that she is an orphan. She is an orphan. She's mistreated. And when she stands up for herself, the punishment is that she's sent away to a school where she is mistreated. Because she stands up for herself, she's deemed evil, basically. And this school is a money-making business. It's a profit-making business for the person who runs it. And he runs it under the auspices, under the name of it being a Christian institution, which is trying to save the children's souls. And don't get me started on that as a tangent, because we can talk about like children's morality literature from the Victorian period. I can talk about that forever. But let's focus just on Jane Eyre right now. So it was a predominant belief at the time that children's souls needed to be saved, and that they were inherently evil, these children, and all of their natural human impulses and mistakes made and selfish tendencies, little joys, all of these things were evil and needed to be eradicated from their lives. And so she's sent to a school which really believes that she's even more evil than just the basic evil, and has to go through a lot of shame, and they try to break her, and she loses her best friend to illness. And through that, she becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. She ends up being a teacher there until finally she feels like she's fulfilled all the things that she can fulfill in that place. She feels too big for it, and yet she's incredibly humble, but she feels too big for it, and puts an ad in the newspaper saying that she is looking for a position as governess, and gets hired to go to work for a Mr. Rochester, to be the ward or the governess of the ward, Adele, of a Mr. Rochester. Mr. Rochester he gets a really bad rap. Mr. Rochester gets a really bad rap because he is full of himself, and he is a bit domineering. He is confusing, purposefully confusing, because he is confused. He has got a secret. Everybody hates him because of his secret. Everybody hates him because of his secret. Spoilers. He has a wife in the attic. She's a wife who is someone he loved, but who has mental health issues and is a danger to herself and others. What do you do with a wife who's a danger to herself and others when, you had this vision? You're this man, this good man, and you have this vision of your future. You've just gotten married to a woman that you love, and slowly she's degrading into this terrifying, troubled woman. And it's the 1830s, and psychology and mental health don't exist. And what do you do? Like, not only do you feel like life has betrayed you, taken away this beautiful thing, like you asked for bread and you got a snake, right? What do you do? He doesn't know what to do. We look at him, and we're from our 21st century perch, our place of superiority, and we're like, well, you don't lock her up in the attic. I mean, he cares for her. He visits her. He makes sure she has all the food, water, and warmth that she needs. And he keeps her from attacking him and herself and others. What else can he do? Genuinely, tell me, what else can he do? Jane Austen, her family, had a son with mental health issues, and they sent him away. That's the thing you do. That's the thing you do at this time. So people get on their high horses about Rochester and his decisions, but what else was available to him, right? And also, remember, he's working from a place of pain. So he leaves. He often travels. He goes, he has affairs. He falls in love with other women. And then he comes back and takes care of his responsibilities. And he kind of feels like this is going to be his life forever. And then this little being, this little elf, this magical being, there's all of this, like Anne of Green Gables. People forget this too, but like Anne of Green Gables, there's all of this like witchy magical imagery used to describe both Anne of Green Gables and Jane Eyre. Jane is the most normal, like down-to-earth, human, not magical person you will ever meet. And as you read the book, you realize that. But in his eyes, she is an elf. Like, she's got mischievous magic. And she uses it on him. Like, that is his perception. That somehow, some way, it's an illusion that she is this quiet, reserved, stable human woman. And in reality, she is this elf. He calls her an elf. That's why I keep going back to that word. And in a way she is. She doesn't intend to be. She's not doing it like through any power of her own. But in a way she is, because she changes his entire life. He realizes that he actually wants something different. And he wants it so badly that he loses touch with his reality. But he's confused. He's confusing because he's confused. Because he knows what he's got going on in his head and his attic. If the attic is the head. I mean, if the head is the attic of the body. He knows what he's got going on in his head. He knows she doesn't know. He knows he wants her. He knows he shouldn't have her, but he knows he can have her because she doesn't know what's going on in his head. So he's at war. He's at war. So he's confusing. And he wants her so badly that he just silences all the thoughts that say anything but get her at all costs. So he proposes to her. They're about to get married. And at their wedding, you know the part in all the movies where it's like, if anybody knows any reason why these two should not be joined together, that happens. Somebody comes in and they're like, actually, he's already married. He cannot marry her. He's already married. And Jane's whole world falls apart, just like Rochester's whole world fell apart when he married Bertha, his first wife. So Rochester joyfully, trustingly, lovingly goes into this union with Bertha, and it all falls apart, and his whole world is ruined. His whole concept of the world is ruined. And he responds with pain and trying to find ways to numb that pain. And then Jane, just through her existence, calls him out of that. And Jane goes blindly, lovingly, happily into this marriage. And before it can actually happen, she loses it all. Her entire world is broken. And she responds. She responds by walking into it, by facing it. She runs away. She runs away, but she faces the pain in herself. She doesn't run away. She leaves. She's like, I cannot be a part of this. I can't be this. And neither can you. Neither can you, Edward. And so they kind of mirror each other a little bit in that. And she goes off to try to be someone different, build a different life, and leaves all of that behind. And she works through a lot of stuff, learns a lot of stuff, finds out things about herself and her family, heals herself of this pain by facing it in a very Jane way. She receives another marriage proposal, one of practicality. Like, you're the person who proposes to her the second time, St. John, he doesn't see anything magical about her at all. To him, she is strong, sturdy, a hard worker, unemotional, prime marriage material, right? He wants to take her and make her a missionary with him, like to be his counterpart as a missionary in India. And she struggles with that because she knows what it is to be loved, and she can't make herself settle for anything less than being loved. She kind of touched into the magic of herself, and nothing else will do. But he's pretty convincing, and she doesn't know what else to do. and she is having a little bit of an inner struggle when she hears the disembodied voice of Edward Rochester call to her. And up to this point, all the weird and gothic things that have happened have all been human, coincidental, deliberate manipulations of reality. But that's magic right there. That's magic right there. Nobody ever talks about the call that comes across the field. Nobody ever talks about that. There are more things that are dreamt of in your philosophy. Horatio. And she drops everything and she runs. She runs back to him because there's no other option. There is nothing else to do. Like, not, oh my gosh, I have no other options, but like, it must be responded to, this call. She's compelled. And people also talk about how she compromises because she marries him. She gets back to him and he has been wiped out. His house is burned down. His wife's killed herself. He's blind. He's lost a hand. Things are messed up for Rochester. It's been a hard few years. Things are really, really hard. There's a reason why his soul called for Jane, right? And she gets there and they're finally equal, you know? They're finally equal. And I think it's just the most beautiful love story. Not like Wuthering Heights beautiful. This is a different kind of beautiful. It's two people having very similar lives, but very, very different on the outside, but very similar on the inside, inevitably brought together. And in that inevitable coming together, freeing themselves to be fully themselves, to really, each of them can really lean into their actual strengths and desires and joys and heal. Rochester literally begins to heal when Jane returns, like his eyesight begins to come back. And it's just so wonderful. It's just so wonderful. It is my favorite book for a reason and has been pretty much for like 2/3 of my life, 3/4 of my life. And I could talk to you more about many more things. But yeah, this is a book I feel like I'm master of, or mistress of. Question number 4, Fullerton, Northanger Abbey. Now, there was nothing so charming to her imagination as the unpretending comfort of a well-connected parsonage, something like Fullerton. Name a book containing a contented family. Little Women, one of the most contented families I know. Yes, there's inner turmoil. I mean, there are 5 women living together, 4 sisters. Of course, there's going to be some scuffles. But ultimately, this is the most contented family in literature, and they're not untouched by sorrow. I mean, Beth dies, the father's been in the war, Amy marries Laurie, who was in love with Joe, who I maintain is still in love with Joe, and Joe marries her professor, right? They're a happy family, a little bit messed up, but they're a happy family. I'm going to go through that one quickly. Number 5. Can you tell I'm trying to speed it up a little bit? Number 5, Rosings Park, Pride and Prejudice. He declared he might almost have supposed himself in the small summer breakfast parlor at Rosings, a comparison that did not at first convey much gratification. Name a book that other books are constantly being compared to. Romeo and Juliet. Okay, this might be another long one. Number 6, HMS Sloop, the Asp. So this is a boat in Persuasion. Quite worn out and broken up, I was the last man who commanded her. Show us a book that is looking the worse for the wear. I'm going to go with the things they carried. This is a book that I adore. I so lovingly have annotated and noted and written in and studied this book. We're just going to keep going. We're going to keep going because we're going to get into here. I want to show you a couple of really, like, you can tell when some things start to become key, but we ain't seen nothing yet. Oh, we're getting there. This chapter is pretty pivotal to the story. Yep, we're getting there. We're getting there. Oh, and what just fell out is actually my key to the entire book. My key to the entire book. This book is a glorious beast. This book is a glorious, glorious beast. This book is a life-changing beast. If you have not read this, you definitely need to read this. And I have said, I tell myself to end my reading with a return to page 56. What's on page 56? Oh, it's where the key resides, of course. Page 56. I need to reread this. If you've been around for a while, you will hear me say that you should read this book, but you can't read it once, you have to read it 3 times. And once you've read it 3 times, let's talk. Someday I'll do a whole video on this book. And then we have number 7, Northanger Abbey. And Abbey, yes, it was delightful to be really in an abbey, but she doubted as she looked around the room whether anything within her observation would have given her the consciousness. Name a book that wasn't as creepy or dramatic as you thought it would be. Okay, I don't actually have a copy of this book anymore because it wasn't as creepy or dramatic as I thought it would be. And that is House of Leaves. That was the biggest letdown of a book I think I've ever read in my entire life. It is so weird and pompous and full of itself. It's so aware of itself. I do not understand the hype that it gets. Yeah, it's weird, but like, it's pointless. The book is pointless. And no one can tell me otherwise. Please don't say, oh, go back and read just the notes, or read this and then read that, or you have to do it this way or that way. You have to read it upside down while drinking pigeon tea. I don't know. I don't even know what pigeon tea is. Tea made of pigeons? Yum. Please don't, because nothing, like, I am a very open-minded person, and my mind is so closed to this book. It's so closed. I feel like I wasted a week of my life on this book. And yeah, hated that book. Number 8, we're moving and grooving. Number 8, Portsmouth, Mansfield Park. The smallness of the house and thinness of the walls brought everything so close to her that, added to the fatigue of her journey and all her recent agitation, she hardly knew how to bear it. Name a book that disappointed you when you revisited it. Okay, so I've been rereading all of Sophie Kinsella. I'm a little bit behind, but I've been rereading all of Sophie Kinsella and kind of in publication order. A couple have moved around a little bit. And so I started with her older work. She first published under the name Madeline Wickham, and I do not enjoy those books at all. They're kind of like dark and a little depressing, romances, social commentaries. They don't have the sparkle and light of her recent work. It just so happened, I did not do this on purpose, it's just an interesting coincidence or synchronicity, but she announced this year that she actually has brain cancer. And this is the year that I decided I was going to reread all of Sophie Kinsella. And Sophie Kinsella is one of my favorite authors. She's an auto-author for me. I've read everything she's ever written, whether I've liked it or not. And I have loved most of it. But her earlier work as Sophie Kinsella, as herself, publishing as herself, is more in tune with that kind of Madeline Wickham sort of vibe. And I really don't like it all that much. And so my reread of Remember Me was a case of that. This is a lot about like infidelity. There's some memory loss, and then she's coming to, she realizes that she's actually was involved in an affair, and that affair is the man that she's actually in love with. The man that she's married to is actually really awful. She's really selfish and manipulative. It is a sweet love story, and I do ultimately want everybody to be with somebody who makes them happy. Like, I'm not knocking that, but like, I wish that she would have ended her first relationship before she started her second relationship. It just has a different feel to it, just a different feel. So upon a reread, this was not a favorite. I kind of knew that going into it. I kind of knew, like, I was skeptical going in, but it was definitely not a favorite, and that was just a confirmation. By the way, she does have a book coming out in October. Sophie Kinsella is releasing another book in October, and it is about a woman with brain cancer. She's calling it her most autobiographical fiction yet. She says that it was really cathartic to write it. And I think that it's just going to be like, don't talk to me in October. I think I'm just going to be crying and crying and crying and crying. I mean, you can talk to me in October. Just know I'm probably going to be crying as I read this book. Yeah. Anyway. Question number 9. Kelly Lynch Hall, Persuasion, Principal Seat, Kelly Lynch Hall in the County of Somerset. Name a book from your ancestral home. Wuthering Heights is the book that I named. My ancestral home. Wuthering Heights. Hello again. Why did I pick this book? How am I interpreting ancestral home? So, I mean, I could have picked a book. So my ancestors come from predominantly England, Scotland, Belgium, and Germany. That's what Ancestry.com tells me. A little bit of France in there, enough to show up, and a little bit of Finland in there, which we don't know where that comes from. I don't know where that comes from. I could have picked based on that, I suppose, but I didn't. I didn't at all. I picked based on emotion, I guess, like a draw or a magnetism too. Jane Eyre is a book that I absolutely love as well, you can tell. But when I think about books that move me, books that I feel like I come from, which is a weird thing to say when you think of the content of this book. I think of Wuthering Heights. I think of the moors. I think of Kathy, and ghosts, and love that will not die. So I went with this one. When I visited Haworth, when I went to go to the Bronte parsonage, like I took a pilgrimage there. I went, one summer I went and spent a long time in England, and it was like a lifelong dream fulfilled. I didn't want it to end. I needed more time, but it was also like a great time. And I just went by myself and I did anything I wanted. I had things set up. I had certain things I wanted to make sure I did, but mostly I just woke up each day and went, what am I going to do today? Where am I going to go today? One day I got up and went to Scotland. Like, what am I going to do today? But one thing that I absolutely knew, and the thing that kind of like the very first piece of the trip, before I had gotten tickets or anything, I booked a place at a bed and breakfast. I booked a room at a bed and breakfast in Haworth, and I built the entire trip around that. So I was like, this is it. This is why I'm going. And not for the bed and breakfast, but to go and see Bronte Land. And it was so strange because it felt like I'd been there before. And it's probably just that I have read these books so much, and I've read all the biographies, and I've read everything you can think of, literary criticism and all the poetry and all the things, everything anybody has ever said about the Brontes, I've probably read it, or read about it, and watched all the movies and all the documentaries and all the biopics, even the one in French. I watched them all, and I felt like I knew where I was. And yeah, So I think that is what's calling to my ancestral home. I don't know, maybe in another life I lived there, who knows? But there's this very deep connection between me and these books and these women. And I don't know what it is. I can't name it, but it's there and it's real. And so that is my ancestral home. And then number 10, Pemberley. They had now entered a beautiful walk by the side of the water, and every step was bringing forward a nobler fall of ground. Name a book that you are ready to dive into. I didn't pick a book for this. I'm going to go with the book that I just told you about. I'm going to go with the Sophie Kinsella because I'm definitely ready to dive into that. It's not being released until October, but I already have it pre-ordered. And as soon as it gets here, I will drop everything that I am doing and may even take a day off of work and read it. I haven't taken a day off of work to read a book since Harry Potter. And yes, I did. Yeah, I think I might do that. I don't know about taking the day off of work. I think I might make that my answer to that question. And then there's a bonus question. It says, which of these households would you most like to live in? And that is an easy answer for me. Barton Cottage, which is the cottage that started it all with this tag. So the first question was the grandeur of the, the second question. Barton Cottage. In comparison of Norland, it was poor and small indeed. Name a book about a household in difficult circumstances. So I don't want to live in a household in difficult circumstances, but Barton Cottage is the small, rundown home that becomes like a place of refuge and rest for this family when they lose everything. I would want to live in Barton Cottage because I like old things. I really, really, really want an old house. I know all of the difficulties that come with that, but it is a lifelong dream of mine to restore an old house. I don't care where or how old. Well, I do care how old. I want it to be old. Like, don't come to me and be like, this is from the 1950s. That's not old. I want it to be old, and I want to restore it. I want to make it beautiful. I want to make it a home. I want to make it lived in. I want to make it loved. I want to make the song that my 8th graders sang for the graduation was I Want a House with a Crowded Table. I want a house with a crowded table. I do. I want to make a home, and I want to do that by taking something old and restoring it, taking something broken and making it new. I had a friend who promised to get me an old house once. I'm going to hold them to that at some point in my life. Just going to show up and be like, excuse me, do you remember when you said you would get me an old house? And if it wasn't old enough, you would even make it older. You would make sure it had no roof, and you would knock out all the windows. If there were windows, you would knock them out. I want an old house. So, Barton Cottage would definitely be the house for me. I would want Barton Cottage so that I could take it and make it new and beautiful and a home. Comfy and cozy and inviting with a big table, and everybody comes around and eats at it, not eats the table. Yum. When I was very little, I had the original Little People. Now the Little People are like big and bulky, but like the Fisher-Price Little People, they used to be small, choking hazards. Loved them. And blocks. My dad worked, when I was very young, he worked as a carpenter. He built houses, and he also builds things. Like he would build our bookshelves and things like that. Built me a desk once that I loved. But he would bring home scraps. So I had some like colored blocks that you purchase at a store, but I had a lot of just like scraps of wood, of lumber that were cut off, discarded pieces of new houses, right? And I would take them and I would build my Little People these homes. And I always had them have family dinner, and the dog always got to sit at the table. And yeah, I would take over an entire coffee table. I would build a whole house on this coffee table, and move the little people in. And the first thing they would always do would be to sit around this big table. So lifelong dream. I want a house with a crowded table. I want an old house made new with a crowded table. Yeah. That's it. This has been the longest tag ever. I didn't know I had quite so much to say about all of these books, but I guess if you pick a bunch of books that you feel so passionately about, then you're gonna have a lot to say. So there you go. This has been a great tag. I will tag the two videos that I mentioned at the beginning of the video. Not tag them, I will link them down below. If you agree or disagree with anything I've said, and I've said some pretty controversial things in the literary world, feel free to give your opinion. I may not agree with it. Please always keep your comments kind and generous. And yeah, thanks for listening to all of this. These are some great books. These are some of the best books I've ever read. These are some of the most impactful books on my life. And I would love to know the answers that you would give if you were doing this. And if you choose to do this tag, please let me know, because I really want to watch and hear all of your thoughts about all of your books. Let's go read. Jane Austen, maybe?